Most African gray owners believe stress is easy to spot: a screaming bird, feather plucking, refusing food, maybe biting. Those are the warning signs people watch for. But what if the real stresses happen long before those behaviors appear? What if some of the most common, everyday things owners do, things that feel harmless or even affectionate, are quietly overwhelming one of the most intelligent birds on Earth? And what if your African gray has been trying to communicate that stress the entire time, in ways most people simply don't recognize? Because the truth is, African grays don't just react to their environment. They analyze it, they anticipate it, they remember it. And that means the smallest details in your daily behavior: where you place their cage, how you look at them, how predictable your schedule is, can shape their emotional world in ways most owners never realize. By the end of this story, you'll understand 7 everyday habits that secretly stress African greys, why they affect these birds so deeply, and what they reveal about the extraordinary psychology hiding behind those bright red tails and quiet, watchful eyes. But to understand why these behaviors matter, we have to start somewhere unexpected. Not in a living room with a cage, but in the rainforests of Central and West Africa. Because the African gray wasn't built for silence, cages, or unpredictable human households. It evolved in one of the most socially complex environments in the animal kingdom. In the wild, African grays live in large flocks that can number dozens or even hundreds of birds. Their days follow an incredibly consistent rhythm. They wake with the sun. They fly together to feeding grounds. They spend hours foraging, communicating, and solving small environmental challenges. Then, as evening approaches, they return to communal roosting trees where the entire flock settles for the night. The key word here is predictable. Every day follows patterns. Every flock member knows the signals, and every bird constantly monitors the emotional cues of the group. African greys didn't just evolve intelligence to solve puzzles, they evolved it to navigate relationships. And that distinction changes everything. In the 1970s, behavioral researchers began studying just how advanced these birds really are. The most famous subject was a gray parrot named Alex, studied by animal psychologist Dr. Irene Pepperberg. Alex didn't just mimic words, he understood concepts. He could identify colors, shapes, and numbers. He could ask for objects he wanted. He could even express frustration when experiments bored him. At one point, Alex correctly answered questions about objects he had never seen before by applying learned concepts. This stunned researchers, because it meant parrots weren't just copying sounds. They were processing information. But this intelligence has a hidden side. Highly intelligent animals tend to experience more complex emotional states, and that means environments that seem fine to humans can feel deeply stressful to them. Which brings us to the first habit that quietly unsettles many African greys: intense eye contact. For humans, eye contact often signals connection. We look at pets to show affection. We stare at them while talking to them. We lean close and gaze into their eyes. But in the wild, prolonged eye contact means something very different. Among many prey animals, including parrots, direct staring can signal a predator. Think about how hawks hunt. They lock onto prey visually. So when a human leans toward a gray and holds intense eye contact, the bird's instincts can interpret that moment as pressure rather than affection. Some grays respond by looking away, others freeze, some puff their feathers or become unusually quiet. Owners often misread this behavior as calmness. But in reality, the bird may simply be trying to de-escalate a perceived threat. The second hidden stressor is schedule inconsistency. Remember the rhythm of wild flocks. Wake, forage, socialize, rest. Now imagine the opposite. One day the bird wakes at 7 a.m. The next day the household sleeps until 10. Some nights the lights stay on past midnight. Other nights the cage is suddenly covered early. Humans tend to view these changes as minor lifestyle shifts. But to a gray parrot, unpredictability can feel destabilizing. Studies on captive parrots have shown that inconsistent routines often correlate with higher levels of stress behaviors, including pacing, feather destruction, and sudden aggression. These birds aren't just reacting to a moment, they're reacting to uncertainty. And intelligent animals are especially sensitive to environments they can't predict. Now let's talk about something even subtler. Where the cage sits in your home, many people place cages in quiet corners or spare rooms. It seems logical. The bird gets peace and quiet. But African greys evolved to constantly monitor social activity. In a flock, isolation can mean danger. So when a grey sits alone in a low-traffic room, it may feel cut off from its flock, the human household. On the other hand, placing a cage in the center of chaos, next to televisions, kitchen noise, or loud music, can create the opposite problem. Too much stimulation. The ideal placement sits somewhere in between, where the bird can observe family life without being overwhelmed by constant activity. Another habit that secretly stresses African greys involves loud emotional reactions. When parrots scream, many owners react instantly. Some yell back, some rush over dramatically, some laugh loudly because the noise seems funny. But here's the unintended message that behavior sends. To a highly intelligent parrot, loud reactions often signal heightened emotional energy, and parrots instinctively mirror emotional intensity within their social group. So a dramatic human response can accidentally reinforce screaming rather than reduce it. Over time, the bird learns something powerful. Noise equals attention. Attention equals stimulation, which means the screaming grows stronger. But perhaps the most misunderstood stressor involves something many owners consider kindness: constant handling. African greys are social birds, but social doesn't mean they want interaction every minute. In the wild, they spend hours quietly foraging, preening, or resting. Yet in captivity, some birds experience near constant engagement. People pick them up repeatedly. Guests want to interact. Children want to hold them. Phones come out for videos. From the human perspective, this looks like love. From the bird's perspective, it can feel like social overload. Imagine being in a room where someone constantly asks for your attention. Eventually, your brain needs quiet. Greys are no different. Another hidden stressor involves something surprisingly simple: sudden loud laughter or startled reactions. African greys are incredibly sensitive to emotional tone. Their brains are wired to detect changes in vocal energy. A sudden burst of laughter, shouting during sports games, or even excited cheering can trigger alert responses. Over time, repeated exposure to unpredictable bursts of loud emotion can keep a bird in a mild but chronic state of vigilance. And that brings us to the seventh and perhaps most overlooked stressor: inconsistent responses to behavior. One day, a bird climbs on your shoulder and it's adorable. The next day, the same behavior annoys you. One day, a whistle is praised. The next day, it's ignored. To humans, this feels normal. But intelligent animals depend heavily on clear behavioral feedback. Inconsistent responses create confusion, and confusion often leads to anxiety. When researchers study captive parrots, one pattern appears again and again. The birds that thrive best in human homes aren't necessarily those with the biggest cages or the most toys. They're the ones living in predictable, emotionally stable environments. And this leads to a deeper truth many new owners don't hear often enough. African greys are not just pets, they are long-term social partners. Their average lifespan in captivity can exceed 40 to 50 years. That means adopting a grey can be closer to a lifelong relationship than a typical pet ownership experience. And that's why misunderstandings can create breaking points. Many birds surrendered to rescues aren't aggressive, they're overwhelmed. Years of subtle stress accumulate until behaviors escalate into biting, screaming, or feather destruction. At that point, owners assume the bird is difficult. But often, the bird is simply responding to an environment that never made sense to its instincts. The good news is that African greys are remarkably adaptable. Once their environment becomes predictable and respectful of their social signals, many birds relax quickly. Owners often report dramatic personality changes after simple adjustments, like setting consistent sleep times or reducing overstimulation. So, what should every gray owner remember? First, intelligence requires predictability. African greys thrive when daily routines stay stable. Consistent sleep, feeding, and interaction schedules help them feel secure. Second, social connection matters more than constant attention. Your bird wants to feel part of the household, but it also needs quiet time to observe and relax. Balance interaction with independence. Third, your emotional energy shapes your bird's emotional world. Calm responses, steady behavior, and clear communication help create an environment where these incredibly perceptive animals feel safe. Because the most fascinating thing about African greys isn't just their ability to talk, it's their ability to understand. They watch, they listen, they analyze patterns in our behavior, and in many ways they adapt their lives around us. Which means the real question isn't whether African greys are intelligent enough to notice what we do. It's whether we're aware enough to notice what they're trying to tell us. If you share your home with one of these remarkable birds, you're not just living with a pet, you're living with a mind. And when we begin to understand how that mind experiences the world, something amazing happens. Our homes stop feeling like cages and start feeling like flocks.